So, uh, s- Starting out, our holidays are very unique and special. We do Jewish holidays as well as my Latin cultural holidays, as you can see the picture there with the quinceañera, and then we just added some Jewish elements during the reception, so it made it very unique and special to our family, which is a very important point, is that there is no wrong way. It's just a matter of what works for you and how you can grow together. So, a little bit about me. I came to this country from El Salvador when I was about 6 years old. I did not know any English. I came and felt very disconnected between home and school. I learned English rather quickly, and I really felt like I had to be a different person at school and a different person at home to be able to kind of fit in the best that I could at school. So along the way, I learned to become two different identities in a way. I also became the translator because my mom and grandma at the time did not speak English. So I had to step into that role. Um, and within that, growing up, I blended more and more with that white passing role because it was easier. I did not feel Latina enough. And appearance wise, it made it easier to fit into that majority conformed society. So I would disassociate when microaggressions would happen and say, well, they're not talking about me. So through that journey, I did not feel accepted until I went to college. And then it was a full immersive environment where everybody just promoted bilingualism, and everybody was just very involved in their cultural acceptance, and it was a little overwhelming for me. I wasn't sure if I was going to fit into that role either. So I struggled, but along the way, many years in the making, I finally was able to accept myself. And I think the main reflection for me was I do not want my children to experience that with me. I want them to learn about their background and their culture, their languages, our rich food. That's amazing. So when we had our first daughter, we agreed with my husband that he would speak Hebrew, I would speak Spanish at home, and they would get English outside of the home to really embrace that environment. So that worked for many, many years. And I felt like we were going, she was born, we kind of had a good pace. And then we got my second child when my first one was 2.5. And I got handed this amazing, beautiful, deaf baby that I did not know where to even start. So I kind of felt like here I am again. It's a brand new journey. It's just, figuring it out. And I felt somewhat prepared because I had done this once and then really twice because my husband was Israeli. So I had to learn the, Jewish customs, Israeli ways, which are very, very similar to Latinos, but I had to preserve my Latino heritage with him, alongside him, which was very important for me. He was very respectful and I was very respectful. And so here comes this third new language, new culture. And yes, it was very overwhelming. Um, I was at Ellie, my daughter. She is the middle child. She was the first deaf person I had ever even met. So just learning to navigate that. And unfortunately, my first experience was with a very typical medical community of, oh, I'm so sorry. It's must be awful. Don't worry, we'll fix her. Um, and it was a roller coaster from there. Um, I remember when she was a year, we went to a panel of college deaf students, and all of them, what they said was that their biggest regret was that they wished they would have learned sign language when they were much younger. So I leaped into this new role of being a parent of a deaf child. And even though everybody kept telling us, do not sign, she'll never speak, we chose to listen to all the deaf students advocating for themselves. And we chose sign language for her. And it was the best decision we ever made because she never fell behind in communication. That was a very difficult decision at the time. And believe it or not, we got a ton of pushback, but I'm so thrilled that we did not listen. Unfortunately, with that came also of the only use English. So I unfortunately did listen to that because I felt like I had to give something if I'm already pushing back on the sign language. So we eliminated Spanish and Hebrew from our life. And to this day, it is my absolute biggest regret because I felt like I had done everything I said I would not do with my children, and that was deprive them of their heritage, their languages, and their culture. So it is never too late. And luckily, I had the privilege of having a very supportive family, and blessed that my husband had a job that allowed me to go back to school. So I went back to school to learn sign language, got a degree in sign language, and realized I don't think I'm done, and transferred to CSUN for deaf education and child and adolescent development in applied research. A mouthful. But it really opened my eyes as to everything that I had been really depriving my daughter of in her world, and things that I didn't realize I missed out and I was going through in my life. So I once again decided I was not done. And I am currently at Columbia University for grad program for social work. And my focus is deaf children, hearing parents, and assimilation and acculturation, and how to provide intervention and cultural services, because it is a very complex world, and it requires so much. So that is how I ended up with this um, background. So I want to now discuss a little bit of the difference between assimilation and acculturation, because it is a big difference. So assimilation is that idea that you have to become that dominant group, that majority conformity. So you have to no longer possess that social, cultural, or personal difference that made you you. You have to conform and become a big old pot. Like if you see the illustration at the bottom, you throw in everything that you are, and you have to completely melt and become just the one identity. So you really lose yourself. You lose your customs, your self-identity, your languages, everything just gets lost and becomes just one thing. But if you look at acculturation, oh, it's beautiful. It's this amazing salad, like I picture my family is. It's a mix of everything that's beautiful. Everybody brings their own thing, and you don't have to change. You just get to highlight it. So a tomato gets to stay a tomato among all the other vegetables in the salad, and you get to keep the cultures balanced together. You get to become yourself and really teach and learn, model. And it really is the ideal way. And it gets missed many of the times when we're working with Latinx families, and especially deaf Latinx families. So assimilation is can be a very tough journey for deaf in general, but especially for deaf Latin youth, because there's multiple factors, right? You're looking at, are you deaf first? Are you Latinx? You don't have to pick, but the tools are often what's missing. So there's a lot of pressure to fit in and succeed while still staying connected to those cultural heritage roots. Those can have a significant impact in their mental health. So why is this an important topic? So as parents and educators, it's crucial to understand mental health effects of forced assimilation, which is typically what happens. We're forcing them to, you know, function in a hearing world. We're forcing them to, stay focused on just one language. And you need to just open up that mindset and understand that the community needs to provide culturally sensitive services that will support the well-being of that Latinx youth and their families. So that's a key word, is and their families. You can't do it alone. You have to do it together. Speaking as a parent, I felt like an outsider to my daughter's education for a little while, and I am very involved in her IEP and very involved in the deaf community. But when it came to what she's learning, she would come home and I would have to, break it down or specifically reach out. And so I think when we discuss the community, again, it involves the parents, especially when we're trying to really facilitate and embrace and encourage this, Latin cultural salad. So some assimilation and mental effects. So there's assimilation pressure. So deaf Latinx youth may struggle to fit in school. This is because, again, they feel like they're no sense of belonging. A culture of stress is when the deaf Latinx youth tries to adapt to the new culture. So this could be adapt to that hearing world and, not embrace their sign language, or it could be not identifying with the Spanish speaking Latinx, family that we have at home. So this can create all sorts of stress and that sense of homesickness. So that, just feels like you're not home anywhere. You're just floating around. Identity struggles. So deaf Latinx youth face the challenge of conforming to the dominant culture. So once again, that could be hearing or that could be English speaking. while maintaining a connection on their own. So this can lead to confusion, disorientation, and a sense of non-belonging. But the one that affects our Latinx youth the most is cultural erosion. So that's when you start to lose touch of our cultural roots, like what had happened with my children when I deprived them from their cultural roots at home and focusing on the English language. um, it can lead to a loss of identity and a disconnect of not feeling Latina, not feeling that that is your culture or your background. So this, like in my case, can happen when they are discouraged from speaking their native language or participating in cultural practices and traditions. And this happens also because of access. So I struggled to try to interpret for my daughter, Spanish terms. I didn't know how to explain certain customs or traditions when she was little. So that also led to it. Now, luckily, we were able to kind of get by with a lot of pictures, and we were lucky to find resources that provided deaf events, but they are one in a few. So some tips. So this is from both my personal experience and some of my educational experience, but mostly it's really been my daughter experience, asking her what she would want me to do. How can I help her? And she is 13 now, so she definitely voices her concerns. Is a great self advocate, and that's made it easier for me as a parent to support her, which is also why it's so important to teach those self-advocacy skills, which I'll go into a little bit later. So some of the things that I would suggest is learning sign language, which was my first thing that I did. Seek bilingual and culturally inclusive resources. Connect with deaf and Latinx or Hispanic, if you identify as that, communities. Advocate for inclusive policies. Get involved in cultural activities. Encourage cultural understanding. That one is important. Seek out inclusive environments. Stay informed about resource and policies. So, learning sign language and maintain Spanish. That one's the one that for me, I felt like I missed. I felt like I had to drop one to learn the other. So you can learn sign language and continue to utilize your Spanish together as a family. This can help improve your communication and promote bilingualism in the home. And you get to embrace both the deaf and Latinx, Hispanic cultures. So seek bilingual and culturally inclusive resources. Look for resources such as books, videos, websites that are available in both Spanish and sign language that celebrate Latinx Hispanic customs, language, culture, and overall heritage. This is also pictures at home. If you have if you have traveled, or like myself, I was born in El Salvador. So going through pictures of when I was a baby there, my mom's living there, those are amazing resources to facilitate that visual comprehension of culture and your customs. connect with Deaf and Latinx communities. So connecting with both communities is really important. That helped me a lot, was being able to connect with other families that were going through the same thing I was, and the same thing the children were. And then they get to learn from each other. They get to, go through this journey together. And it really helped not feel alone, but also really encourage that outsourcing and building bonds together and creating a new community in a sense. Um, so you can also get this by attending deaf events, joining deaf clubs, if you're in middle school and high school. In some elementary schools, they have deaf clubs, and they have a lot of deaf Latinx clubs in high schools and colleges now, which is absolutely amazing. Participating in cultural events. I'm lucky that I live in Los Angeles, so we have a lot of events not far, so we get to go see it. I do not always have an interpreter for her, but what I do to prepare for that is we discuss it ahead of time, watch some YouTube videos, so she can read it along with the captioning, and then from that, she gets to ask me questions, and then we get to address it. So when she goes there, even if I maybe cannot fully interpret everything, I'm able to have those discussions and really appreciate all the cultures. So that's a tool that has worked for us. Advocate for inclusive policies. So advocate for policies and practices to promote language and cultural diversity. This one is a big one because I did not, and I am involved, and I did not know that I could advocate for my daughter to have this cultural diversity in her IEP, which is amazing because now it gets to be built into her curriculum in a sense. Because it is in her IEP, if there is a district sponsored event, like let's say there's a Dia de los Muertos or Cinco de Mayo, which are the main ones, I can request an interpreter to be there because they are part of her cultural diversity, and it's a school sponsored event or a district sponsored event. So that's all extremely important, that how many rights are there for you. Same thing with educators. You're able to, with healthcare providers, you're able to do that as well. If there's any events that are sponsored through kind of that mental health awareness, your rights are there. So don't forget how much power as parents and as advocates that you have. Getting involved in community activities. That again goes back to the being involved with outside resources, is taking those sign language class if they're offered in your community. One thing that I think a lot of parents missed is like, I won't be able to go to all of them. It really doesn't matter. One makes a difference. So go as much as you can or as little as you can, but as long as you go, you will always learn something. Attend cultural events, like I said, family support groups. That can be with just the parents if you want to connect and just talk. It doesn't have to be a formal thing. It could just be, barbecue. Anything that involves that community is such emotional support. Encourage cultural understanding. So really learn to appreciate it's not a burden. It's this beautiful gift that you have been given to have such a rich language and culture. Seeking out inclusive environments. This one for me, I've really had to be careful about certain environments that I exposed my daughter to, because I felt like some of them were a little bit more oppressive than helpful. It was like, oh, I'm so sorry. Here, let her have this. And it was just not the environment that I wanted for my daughter. I want her to, be encouraged and accepted. So I think some of the things you need to kind of look around, but there are so many inclusive events and environments that you can find, especially now, post COVID. There's so many virtual events that are easy to attend. They're right there. You could be in your pajamas. I mean, it's so easy and accessible, which is wonderful. And staying informed. So this kind of touches on all the other ones, but just staying on top of those resources, policies, and initiatives that support Spanish speaking families being able to attend, or even if you can't, there's so many places that will send, if it was on Zoom, will send you the recording, or on social media you can see what to expect for next time if you want to go. There's workshops that are hosted. There's many ways to stay informed, and they are all non-judgmental. And I think that's also sometimes hard, as you feel like the judgment might be there if you're not as fluent, and it really is just such an embracing community. So those are all great ways. But most importantly, my biggest advice is that you do not blame yourself as parents. I know I felt that blame and that guilt for a long time. And you just have to remember that you're doing the best you can with the resources and the information given to you. It took me a very long time to realize what was misinformation and what was truly beneficial. And I had mentioned it before, but photos are worth 1,000 words. Looking through your pictures, involving your children in cooking or preparing for holidays is the best way to involve and appreciate. The top picture is my daughter cooking. We were making tamales. And the bottom is my daughter snapping the snap peas, and my oldest daughter and my mom. And what we do is we will take pictures of everything, and then go back and discuss it from there. For me, sometimes it can be a little overwhelming to try to do everything at the same time. Um, so it really helps to kind of fill in the blanks. All of my children sign, so it's important for us that we all facilitate that communication. But since the learning sometimes is done afterwards, it's important for me to kind of get those pictures and go back and say, what did you think about this? Or do you want to know anything more about how that was done? And that includes if we go on an outing, if we do cooking, if we're decorating for any kind of holiday. It helps an additional tool. And some of the families that I work with, they actually use this in a great way. So they use this and then they send those pictures to school and they're able to all discuss it at school, and they built it into their lesson plans, and all the students kind of bring what they're going to share, and they embed that kind of cultural aspect in it, which is also great. So now the tips for me on how to support. So if you're an educator or part of the community, or just trying to advocate in that community. So really supporting and promoting bilingualism, provide bilingual resources. Sometimes it's easier for us when we know where to go to give it to them than expect parents to just find them and navigate through all of that. Foster inclusive practices, support community-based organizations, advocate for inclusive policies, encourage cultural understanding, connect families to support networks, and promote inclusiveness. So you can promote the use of both Spanish and sign language at home. Let them know that it's okay. And a lot of the times there's this misinformation that parents need to know English to learn sign language, which is not true. And I think sometimes they need that encouragement. They need to know that they don't have to. It's not a block in the road. It's just a fork. So providing bilingual resources. So like I mentioned in the other one, just helping families access this information. Sometimes when you're starting out or when you're trying to kind of embark on this new journey, it's you don't know where to look. So that's very important. Um, and then fostering those inclusive practices. So that just means encouraging them, helping them figure out what works for them, whether it's through providing interpreting, captioning if they're identify more as hard of hearing. It's um, inclusive for any environment. Supporting community-based organizations. So for me, when I say supporting, I mean do not uh, if you're supporting a community-based organizations, you attend as a supporting factor all the time, not only when you're employed, if that makes sense. So you need to be that critical support and resource group for your Spanish speaking families and deaf children or youth at all the times that you are needed. Advocate for inclusive policies. So advocate for policies and practices that promote language and cultural diversity. So that means that um, if you're handed a curriculum, being able to advocate if it's not culturally relevant, if it's not culturally diverse, that's a important factor in the power that you also hold as educators, is that you're able to help change this design of an oppressive curriculum. Not all the power, we understand that, but uh, some navigating factors. Encourage cultural understanding. So encouraging is also understanding and appreciating. And I think that's where representation really matters. is being able to connect with that Latinx community and get that understanding and appreciation through them, through what they've experienced, what those cultural events mean for them, because it can be changed along the way, and why it's important to involve the family as well. Because for some families, certain cultural aspects are very different. Even our Spanish is different throughout the different countries. So it's important that you're able to understand and appreciate. Supporting that one. Promote inclusiveness. So encourage that inclusiveness and breaking down barriers. So it doesn't have to be one or the other. It can always be both. If you go to one event that does not have a Latin aspect, it's fine. The next one can have it. So encourage that diversity in the inclusiveness, and encourage the advocacy within that inclusiveness. So from my experience and the families and the educators that I have worked with, this has been plans that we have put into play that have really, we've seen a difference, is through intervention. So deaf educational professionals works with students and parents together. So this is led by both in a partnership. So alongside both putting in what they envision, a goal, and they work together, whether it's at home, whether it's through a workshop and then applying it at home. But having that support with that. So the second one is applying it into the curriculum. So incorporating culturally focused self-advocacy skills project into the core curriculum has worked very well. So what the self-advocacy skills project is something that I have started within my work is they create this booklet of what they see themselves as. So how do they identify? What do they wish they had access to? What cultural resources do you wish you could access? And how are we going to make those wishes and desires into actions and goals? And they create a book, and it depends on the age. It could be a poster, it could be a booklet, and then in high school, it really is almost like an action plan for college. Like, what are going to be those next steps? But you're incorporating that cultural factor into it, and we really encourage them to try to utilize the different languages that they want. You know, if they're writing in English, we support them with Spanish as well. So it brings in a lot of things. And the last portion of that project is that you get to do it alongside your parents as well. So they get to take a portion of it home, and ask them to kind of help out building it. And then once they're done with that, they bring it back to school, they put it together with pictures and all. Different aspects of what they put in go into the core curriculum. So if it's, you know, within English, they add in certain portions of learning history, they add in what their cultural background or heritage, or important history, you know, events that have happened, and it makes it so the entire classroom is working on it so it's inclusive to everyone from all backgrounds. Um, Mentoring, one-on-one mentoring with Latinx deaf adults and a deaf education professional is a great tool, because there's a lot of things that as parents, sometimes we cannot, especially as hearing parents, we aren't able to foster because we have not experienced that life. So it's important that they see that representation. Um, and then inclusion for me is one of the most important parts, is that this is deaf child or deaf youth led discussions, um, and activities at home. So I think oftentimes we are always telling our youth what to do, what to say, what to think. This is a time to step back and say, what questions do you have? What do you want to do? And how do you want to learn it? And that gives them the power to learn in a way that uh, they can grow and appreciate their identity and their self-worth. And then I want to leave you with some resources. These, for me as a parent, were amazing resources. The websites have a lot of great information, and I wanted to share an influencer that's on social media. And I only picked one because she really has amazing blogs and highlights so many other amazing deaf Latinx influencers as well. And she shares her story about not feeling Latina enough. And it's just a great blog. And my last words are from my daughter when I asked her a few years ago um, what she thought about being Latina. So she wrote, "There's something that I like about being Latinx. I love the culture, language, food, etc. I really want to learn Spanish Sign Language so I can talk with others who are deaf and talk Spanish. I wish I knew more about being Latinx because I want to communicate with people with the same culture and language." And that's when that was hard to hear as a parent, as a Latina mother, that these to me were some of the most simple things that I could facilitate for her that I was not, because I was given misinformation. But we are on the way to fix that, and it's never too late. And I'm learning as I go. And thank you.
Hello, everyone. Thank you so much. We do have a few questions. One is in the chat, I see. We will sign the question and then we will go ahead and respond. So our first question is, what does she recommend for Latino families whose deaf kids attend mainstream schools? Like so many other parents, many do not learn ASL, and many say it's because the Spanish, and there's a huge number. Do you have any advice?
So my daughter is actually in so my daughter is actually in a mainstream environment. So I understand the struggles of both being that isolation in the deaf culture and isolation in that Latino for a Latino family. Um, what we really try to do is give her a lot of resources to go outside. And that's what we try to facilitate for the families that do that as well. Is, it's a lot of work to find those resources, but it is worth it if they can connect even with one other family. It does make a difference because sometimes that isolation of feeling disconnected from it makes it a little bit harder. Also, that's when like making those self-advocacy books and really putting the cultural goal in their IEP makes a difference, because then the school's also responsible for bringing that factor in and really helping them um, learn how their culture impacts their life, their education, and their goals. Um, Classes are very hard to find. What two of my families do is their teachers send them YouTube videos that they caption in Spanish. I know not all teachers have the time to do that, obviously, but there are some social media places that also do, believe it or not, TikTok has a lot of great resources, and I've seen quite a few of them in Spanish. So those are great. The blogger that I put on there, on her website, she has also great tools for sign language. It is more accessible now post COVID because there's a lot of virtual things, but it's really finding the fit that's right for you. But it's for mainstream, I'm gonna say the biggest thing is getting that into their IEP and the support outside of school.
There are three questions in the Q&A section. The first question is, how can we help mainstream students, families who have far less or no access to ASL to improve the communication with their kids?
Um, for me, when I was starting out, and for a lot of families, especially when they're Spanish speaking, uh, virtual access and visual aids helped a lot. So making little postcards um, online, you could find a list of what the signs are, like a visual representation, and posting it on everything helped me really learn the basics so I could kind of get ahead of my kid. And a lot of families find that very helpful, just to kind of put signs everywhere. And virtual learning, I know not everybody lives close to Los Angeles, but if you do, there's resources in Los Angeles that they have trilingual interpreters. So they teach the sign and then the interpreter's voice in Spanish. And that's something that as well you can advocate for your child that's in mainstream, is that you have accessible communication, which includes you as families. And again, I don't think parents realize how much power they have. And if they have sign language classes for like that school or that community, the school can provide an interpreter that will speak in Spanish. um It just needs to be in the IEP. But they do have the full rights to gain that. Um,
Thank you for hosting this webinar. So that's a wrap,
Oh.
unless anyone has another question. So
and if anybody wants to reach out, I can provide my email in the chat really quick. And thank you, everyone. Such an honor to be here presenting for you all.